Hello, my dear friends. Today we're going for a walk together, and sometimes, during a walk by the sea, a thought comes. Clear, simple, yet powerful. Today, it sounded like this. The manipulator always loses, even if it seems like he's in control and gaining from the situation. Let's break down why. On the surface, everything seems perfect. The manipulator knows how to manage the situation. He calculates his moves carefully, presses the right buttons, pulls emotions, resources, attention. He gets everything, here and now. And it might seem like he's the winner. But in reality, that's an illusion. Because his gain is not a true victory in life. It's a tactical trick, a fleeting moment. And in the long run, it always works against him. Why? Because when your partner is not your companion, not your beloved, but just a source of profit, you're not building a relationship, you're imitating one. And everything you create is a temporary construction filled with fear, control, and falseness. It's not a home, it's a stage set. The manipulator is always dependent on someone else. He absolutely needs someone nearby, someone to play with. Without a victim, he is no one. Without a donor, he's empty. He doesn't know how to be alone. He doesn't know how to be in love. He only knows how to be in control. But control isn't closeness. It isn't trust. It's not the joy of shared evenings, the softness of a touch, the laughter over breakfast, or the look in someone's eyes where you see yourself. It's just power, and power is exhausting. Control demands memory, strategy, effort. You have to remember everything, who said what, how they reacted, how to act next time. You can't relax, you can't be vulnerable, you can't be real. You have to wear the mask always, even at night, even in bed, even with yourself. And this is the core paradox. In the attempt to control someone else, you lose yourself. The manipulator doesn't live his own life. He lives inside a scheme he invented himself. He might control his partner, but he can't control himself. He might pretend, but he can't truly feel. He can squeeze emotions out of someone, but he can't actually connect. What surrounds him isn't love, it's dependency. It's not warmth, it's need. It's not a union, it's a contract without signatures. And all of this builds up for years, sometimes even decades, until one morning he wakes up and feels empty. Everything's there, the house, the routine, the partner, but no one is really there. Not a single genuine I love you, not a single honest tear, not one memory that holds something real. Is he winning? No, he lost. He lost life itself. The manipulator wins. The situation, the episode, or the conversation. He gets his pleasure right now. He feels joy when he makes someone doubt themselves. When the victim explains, when her pain says, "You're right," it feels like victory, but it's a win on a battlefield he built out of someone else's broken bones. And that victory is temporary, momentary, false. Because when you zoom out and look at the bigger picture, it becomes clear. The manipulator is the one who loses. Because winning the situation is not the same as winning at life. Let's be honest. Who among us hasn't felt the pleasure of being right, of predicting someone's reaction, of pulling the strings and seeing someone respond? It's human. But when it becomes a system, you stop being human. You become a player in someone else's life. You forget what it's like to just be yourself, because you always have to be someone, smarter, sharper, colder. And during that time, life, real life, goes on without you. People fall in love, they fight and make peace. They hug in kitchens, raise children, laugh at silly things, lose together, win together. And the manipulator? He's alone. Even if someone is nearby, it's not together, it's instead of. Instead of feelings, rules. Instead of care, calculation. Instead of trust, control. You see, winning right here and now doesn't mean you're winning at all. You can make your partner apologize. You can go silent at just the right moment so they'll feel guilty. You can rewrite reality. devalue emotions, twist their feelings. You can even convince someone that you are their salvation. But if the person next to you has to think that, just to survive, then this isn't a relationship. It's a simulation. It's a script where you're the author and the other person is the hostage. And here's the most terrifying part. In such a system, no one can truly be happy, not even the manipulator himself. Because his pleasure always requires tension. He can't let go, can't trust, can't relax. He gets his gain, but loses the ability to live lightly, to laugh without second thoughts, to sleep peacefully, to love without fear of losing control. He's always on edge, not because he's truly alive, but because he's on duty, guarding something that was never truly his. And in this race for power, he misses the most important thing. Real feelings don't appear when you've outplayed everyone. They come when someone next to you can simply exist, without fear, without a mask, without obligation. And then you're not winning, you're living. Everything in this life has a limit, even patience, even love, even energy. No matter how skillfully the manipulator plays his role, sooner or later he faces a simple truth. The victim is not infinite. She may leave, she may burn out, she may stay, but turn into a shadow, a silent being without strength, without desire, without a taste for life. And then comes the moment the manipulator tried to delay for as long as possible. He has to search for a new donor, a new love, as he calls it, but in reality a new source of fuel, a new vessel into which he can pour his needs, just to extract someone else's energy. And here's what's truly tragic. Somewhere deep inside, in the farthest room of his soul, the manipulator knows the person next to him is not a partner, not a friend, not a companion, but prey, food. He may not say it out loud, he may not even admit it to himself, but he feels it. He feeds off another person, emotionally, energetically, sometimes even physically and financially. This is not an equal partnership, this is not a loving connection, this is one-sided exploitation. If we imagine a relationship as a journey on two horses, in this kind of pair, one is pulling the carriage and the other is just sitting inside holding a whip. But even the strongest, most enduring little donkey will collapse eventually. He simply can't go on anymore. And the one sitting in the carriage is left standing in the middle of a deserted road, staring in confusion at the fallen strength, thinking, "Why did you let me down?" Not because he's cruel, but because he doesn't see a living person in his partner. He sees a function, a resource, something that's supposed to work, like a battery, like a bank card, like a horse, but not like a soul. Sometimes these manipulators build relationships that last for years without a single genuine feeling inside. But everything is organized, everything is controlled, everything works, like an office, like accounting. Only inside it's empty. And then one day he wakes up and sees the person next to him, staring at the wall, silent, no longer giving anything. And then, without even feeling much horror, the manipulator starts searching for a new vessel, because the old one is empty, because he has no one to be real with, because he doesn't know how to build, only how to use. And this mechanism is where all the pain lies. To live next to someone who once meant everything to you, and who has now become just another item in your list of energy sources. And even more painful is realizing that you never truly loved this person. You simply chose them for your needs, for convenience, for emotional comfort, for gain, but not for their soul. And here begins the real tragedy, not of the victim, but of the manipulator himself. Because all of his connections are conditional, all of his relationships are instrumental. He has never felt the joy of simply being together, just being, just loving, just living. He didn't lose because someone left. He lost because no one stayed, not truly. The manipulator's loss isn't about someone leaving him. It's not about ending up alone one day. It's about the fact that he spent his entire life in the wrong place. He didn't live, he monitored. He didn't love, he held on. He didn't feel, he analyzed. It's like going into a forest, but instead of lying in the grass and gazing at the sky, you spend the whole day trying to build a fence around the squirrels so they don't bother you. You track how many times a bird chirps, try to predict which way a rabbit will run. You build a strategy, but you never once inhale the scent of pine. And that is the entire paradox of the manipulator. He's in the forest, but he doesn't feel the forest. When you live through control, you live through fear, through lack, through the anxiety that everything will fall apart unless you hold it all together. A manipulator spends so much energy on control, he has nothing left for joy, for laughter, for freedom. It's like riding in a convertible, but always looking in the rearview mirror. The sun is shining, the wind plays with your hair, but you don't see any of it, because you're afraid someone is catching up to you. You're not on a journey, you're in a chase, and you don't even know who you're running from. In healthy relationships, it's completely different. There, you can exhale. You don't have to remember everything. You can be weak, you can be silent, you can disappoint someone and still be accepted. You can argue and not fear being punished with silence. You're not under a microscope. You simply are, and you are loved in that being. It's like a dance where no one is counting the steps, and still you move in harmony. But the manipulator? He's constantly assembling new structures. He's like an architect who rebuilds the building every day. If she says this, I'll say that. If he goes quiet, I'll create a scene. If he catches my lie, I'll accuse him of not trusting me. It's an endless renovation of the soul, but no one lives in that apartment. Here's an example. Imagine a conductor who never actually listens to the music. He waves the baton, commands the orchestra, watches every instrument, but he never hears the symphony, because he's not inside it, he's outside. That's how a manipulator is. He plays his partner like a violin, but he never creates sound himself. And yet life is meant to be lived, to resonate. To cry into someone's shoulder, to laugh in the middle of the night, to argue over something silly and make up without words, to look someone in the eyes and know they see you, not read you like an Excel spreadsheet. Sometimes I think the scariest moment in a manipulator's life is when he is finally left alone with himself. No drama, no victim, no script. When silence sets in, and suddenly he hears his own emptiness, and it becomes terrifying. Because all those years he thought were victories were really just years of postponing life, for later, for that moment when everything is finally under control, when the plan finally works. But life doesn't wait. While you're busy controlling everything, life simply passes you by. In healthy relationships, you're not an architect. You're not a conductor, you're not a tamer. You're a human being. You breathe, you cry, you feel joy. You're allowed to be late, to make mistakes, to fall asleep on someone's shoulder, to laugh at the wrong moment. And that is beautiful, because that is life. There are relationships where two people seem to become one breath. They don't need to control each other, check, compare, or correct. They simply feel good together. Not because they have to, not because it's beneficial, but because the world feels more complete when the other person is near. In such relationships, there is no performance, no script, no role of victim and director. There is real intimacy. And sometimes it's quiet, without drama or display. It's when you're making breakfast, while he takes out the trash. Not out of fear, not because you agreed to it, but because it just makes life easier for each other. It's when you say, I'm struggling, and instead of hearing, oh, come on, not again, you hear, let's just sit in silence together. It's when you wake up in the middle of the night with anxiety, and you don't need to explain anything. You're already being held. This is what real life is, where every morning isn't a battlefield, but simply the start of another shared day. Where Friday doesn't mean, finally, a break from this person, but rather, let's go somewhere we'll feel good, together. In healthy relationships, you don't have to apologize for being tired. You don't have to prove that you're allowed to feel sad. You don't have to fear that if you feel down, they'll turn away, because your sadness is a part of you, and you are accepted as a whole. The manipulator doesn't know this. He doesn't know how to be at peace. Peace, for him, is a threat. In peace, there's nothing to control, nothing to fix, no one to manipulate into justifying themselves. And so, he doesn't live. He's always on duty. He's either chasing emotions, modeling reactions, or scanning the field for threats. He might buy a ring, book a photo shoot, plan an expensive dinner, but he doesn't know how to simply lie next to someone and do nothing. Not because he's lazy, but because doing nothing together feels good. He's never experienced what it's like to laugh until you cry. Not at a joke, but simply because neither of you can pronounce the word pie at 3 a.m. And you both laugh like children until your stomach hurts. And in that moment, nothing in the world matters more than that silliness, that shared laugh, that instant of connection. The manipulator doesn't know what it's like to sit in a car next to someone, listen to music in silence, and feel that the quiet between you doesn't scare you, it connects you. He doesn't know what it's like to argue, not to win, but to better understand each other. He doesn't know what it feels like to say, "You're right," not with a sense of defeat, but with a sense of trust. In healthy relationships, you don't need to be someone else. You can just be yourself, and that's enough. You can cry without fear it'll be used against you. You can ask without begging. You can be strong and soft, in turns. You can grow. You can be silent. You can just be. Sometimes I truly feel sorry for these people, the manipulators. It's hard to feel compassion for someone who causes pain. But I'm not talking about forgiving or justifying. I'm talking about something else, the fact that their life is unbearable too. Because so often they end up in a trap they build themselves, a trap called a convenient relationship. They live with someone they don't love, sometimes for an entire lifetime, because it's convenient, because it's beneficial, because they're afraid of being alone. But you know what's worse than loneliness? Waking up every day next to someone you can't hug without feeling inner disgust, hearing their breathing and getting irritated, hearing their voice and quietly boiling inside. And you have to endure all of this, because the contract, because the mortgage, because the kids, because splitting the apartment would be inconvenient, because it feels too late to change anything. I know couples like this. You can spot them instantly. He gets in the car without waiting for her. She walks behind him, lips pressed tight. They don't argue, they don't speak at all. It's the silence of two people who no longer fight, because fighting requires love. And here, there's only fatigue and resignation. Like they signed a lease for a shared life, with no exit clause. They celebrate birthdays together, take photos in front of the cake, even say some warm words for the guests. And then, at home, each retreats to their own corner. And life begins where no one wants to be noticed. A manipulator in such a relationship is like an actor who long ago forgot he was acting. He's lost in his own character. He built a stage where everyone has a role, but there's no audience. The performance is for an empty hall. And the scariest part, he feels hatred, sometimes quiet and sticky, sometimes loud and sharp. It lives inside him and builds up. He hates not just his partner, but himself, for choosing to live this way. And this hatred doesn't destroy, it rots. It seeps into his body, his gestures, his face. He ages faster, he's constantly tense, because the person next to him is not the right one. And worst of all, he knows it. Some marriages feel like lead shoes. You're walking, maybe even smiling, but every step is effort. You don't run, you don't dance, you don't fly. You just drag yourself through the days, through the years, and no one sees how hard it is for you. And you won't show anyone either, because once you chose the role of the winner. And as we know, winners don't complain. And that's where the real loss happens. Not when someone leaves, but when you find yourself stuck in a cage you built out of someone else's body. out of someone else's love, out of someone else's expectations. You live with someone you lured in, someone you wouldn't let go, someone you use every day, and every day you pay for it. With your disgust, with your indifference, with a pain you can't speak out or cry away, because you made it all up yourself. I feel sorry for these people. Their faces, strained with exhaustion, their fake smiles in photographs, their attempts to look happy on Instagram. Because happiness isn't about who you sleep with. It's about who you can wake up next to and not regret that you did. Yes, of course. In these kinds of relationships, both people suffer. But the victim suffers differently and often much more deeply. Because if the manipulator at least gets some sort of benefit, the victim only loses, gradually, in pieces. First, self-esteem. Then, boundaries. Then, the self. This isn't the kind of pain you can vent over coffee with a friend. It's the kind of pain that makes you stop recognizing yourself in the mirror. You no longer feel like a person. You feel like a convenient service system, a utility, an account the other person can access 24/7. Emotions? Go on, show feelings, but only when it's convenient for me. Money? Well, you'll figure it out. You always do. Favors? You offered, remember? Connections, shelter, body, time, attention, all become access points. You're not a partner, you're a resource plugged into an uninterrupted supply chain. Like a credit card with no PIN, like a charger that no one remembers to unplug. And the worst part? You keep loving in this role. And that makes it even more painful. You protect him, you justify his actions. You tell yourself, well, he had a hard childhood. He just doesn't know any other way. If I just try a little harder, he'll soften. But he won't. He has no intention of changing. To him, you're an energy pump with a faucet that should always work. Sometimes people tell me, well, why are you surprised? The victim gets something too. She doesn't have to think. She doesn't have to scheme. Yes, she doesn't think. The victim doesn't have to build strategies like the manipulator. She doesn't play emotional chess 3 moves ahead. But do you know what's terrifying? The victim isn't the scriptwriter. She's the stage. Everything happens on her, without her consent, without her input. She's used, and then she cleans up after. She cries, but silently, gets tired, but keeps going, feels afraid, but stays. It's like you're a battery, and people demand not just energy, but joy from you too. You're expected to always be in resource, to smile, to give, to soothe, to inspire, to cook, to explain, and inside, you're already at minus 40%. But you keep giving, because they taught you, if you love, endure. The victim isn't directing the show, she's stuck in it. And the worst part is, the show isn't even interesting, it's not a drama, it's a swamp of repeating episodes, looping endlessly. Love, blame, coldness, threat, crumb of warmth, blame again. You wait for resolution, but it never comes, because the manipulator is the author of an endless season where your pain is the main source of intrigue. The victim spends no less energy. Her pain is just passive. It doesn't scream, it doesn't destroy, it just drips inward, drip, drip every day. And at some point, there's nothing left inside, because there's not even enough resource to say, I'm tired. I know what it's like to be in that role. It's not just about pain, it's about identity collapse. When you start doubting yourself, when you no longer know what you want, when you don't even remember who you were before him. You no longer ask for love. You just whisper, can I at least not be blamed today? That's not life. That's a never-ending giveaway, where no one thanks you for anything. And if you recognize yourself in these words, please stop. You are not a stage. You are not a bank. You are not a battery. You are a human being. You have the right to set boundaries, the right to be tired, the right to say no, the right to silence, the right to love, and most of all, the right to a life where you're not just surviving, but truly living. The manipulator believes he's smarter than everyone, that he calculates everything, words, pauses, glances, silences, that he's always 3 steps ahead, that he's the winner, the strategist, the predator, the main player. But in reality, he is a prisoner of his own memory. He has to keep too much in his head, who said what to whom, when he lied, what he promised, when he ignored, and when he pretended to care. He has to remember all his masks, all his roles, all his lines, even the tone of voice. This is not freedom. This is emotional accounting. Every word must be tracked, every reaction predicted, every vulnerable spot of the partner to be used at the right moment. He cannot just say, "I feel bad." He must find a way to use it. He cannot simply hug, only if it strengthens his control. He can't relax, because any relaxation is a risk of losing control, and control is all he has. Have you ever seen someone putting together a puzzle, not for fun, but out of fear that someone might see a missing piece? That's what a manipulator's life is like. There's no room left for spontaneity, no realness, no inspiration, no play, only calculation. He can't afford emotional failure, can't say, "I don't know what to do," can't allow himself to make a mistake, not even alone, in his own mind. He lives like a CEO of someone else's life, where everything must be documented and approved. But his own life? He doesn't live it. It doesn't even exist. All that brilliance could be used for something meaningful, starting a business, building homes, writing music, opening a cafe by the sea, flying, falling in love, learning new things, bringing value to the world. But no, he chooses to be an internal spy agency, watching reactions, simulating scenarios, starting jealousy scenes, handing out guilt disguised as love. Instead of climbing mountains, he weaves delicate webs of manipulation, which he has to repair every night. Instead of a vacation, another episode in the endless show called How to Make Her Apologize. Instead of living, a full-time shift of emotional manipulation. And here begins the masochism no one talks about, quiet, hidden, systemic. It's when you create a regime where you're not allowed to be human. You must stay sharp, you must script every word, you must remember when you said "I love you" and when you said "I don't care." You build a complex series where every day is a new episode, and your partner is the unknowing audience in a play they never asked to be part of. But you know what's the scariest part? No one's even watching the show. You create a multi-season show where each day is a new episode, and your partner is the unknowing audience to a performance they never signed up for. But the scariest part? No one's watching the show. The partner either gets exhausted or leaves, or simply disconnects, living nearby but not with you. And then, the manipulator is left alone in the lead role of a drama he wrote himself. Director, actor, audience, all the same person, a closed-loop life. What if all that energy went into real life, into intimacy, into art, into a conversation with no agenda, into a kiss that wasn't strategy, but simply because you felt like it? A manipulator can be smart, charismatic, talented, but as long as he's building schemes, he isn't living, he's always in process. And life, it moves on. While he's planning his next move, someone else is walking barefoot through the grass. While he's writing the next episode, someone else already said "I'm sorry" and meant it. In the end, the one who tried to control everything is left in a room full of scripts, but no actors, no feelings, no reality. The most paradoxical thing about a manipulator is that he exhausts not only his partner, but himself as well. He believes he's controlling the other person, but in reality he's tormenting himself, day after day, hour after hour. His spontaneity, his true desires, his vulnerability, his weaknesses, he fears them, hides them, suppresses them. He doesn't allow himself to live because he's constantly building a survival model. He can live for years with someone he considers weak, someone he secretly despises for being soft, sensitive, naive, and yet he stays. Why? Because it's easier to control such a person, because it's easier to establish a dominant position, easier not to hear no. But here's the paradox. If the victim is weak, he gets bored. If she's strong, he goes mad with tension, because the fight for control now demands constant focus. A strong victim is a challenge. Every attempt she makes to be independent, to stand her ground, is a threat that must be neutralized, outplayed, devalued. That's when the manipulator switches into total control mode. He's no longer just crafting behavior. He's functioning like an analytical machine. And that's not just exhausting, it's cruel to himself. You know what it's like? Like a man who decides to go on vacation, but calls the office every hour to make sure they can't manage without him. Instead of the sea, there's Wi-Fi. Instead of a walk, spreadsheets. Instead of the sun, the fear of losing influence. That's how a manipulator lives. He's in a relationship, supposedly. He's comfortable, supposedly, but always on high alert. And in this state, it's impossible to enjoy anything. Not love, not another person's body, not food, not a trip, not even a simple conversation. Because every interaction carries a scripted burden. How will she react to this? If I say that, will I lose my dominant position? If he starts feeling free, will he leave? It's constant micro-decision making, and each decision goes against authenticity. At some point, the manipulator turns into a security guard in a warehouse of his own fears. He doesn't live, he guards the system. He doesn't love, he allocates resources. He's not a partner, he's a warden. And not just a warden over others, but over himself. He can't let himself be weak. He can't say, I'm scared. He can't relax. Because inside him lives the terror. If he lets go of control, everything will fall apart. His partner will see the real him. And what if that real version isn't enough? And that's where the real torment begins. Even in a couple, even side by side, even in visible stability, the manipulator feels intensely alone, because he doesn't even trust himself, let alone anyone else. He builds relationships where he trusts no one, which means he doesn't believe in love. His supposed win is living with someone who submits. But if the partner is too compliant, it's boring, uninteresting, not arousing. And if the partner is strong-willed, it's terrifying, exhausting, unstable. In the end, he is stuck in a constant dilemma. Every choice leads to internal conflict, and there's no way out until he admits the truth to himself. He doesn't really want to control. He's just afraid to be real. And this is no longer about relationships. It's about living trapped, where he is his own jailer, where every day he puts on the uniform of authority, but deep down remains a boy who was never chosen, never accepted, never heard. And until you take off that uniform, you'll never be free, even if everything around you is under control, even if everyone plays by your rules, even if no one leaves. You'll still be a hostage to your own system. For the manipulator, control isn't just a tool of influence. It's his only way to feel anything at all. Intimacy terrifies him. Honesty exposes him. But power, leverage, calculation, those are familiar, predictable, like an old shirt. And that's the tragedy, because in his distorted inner world, anything tied to genuine emotion is seen as weakness. Love is a risk, dependency, a threat, vulnerability, a loss. So the model of I lead, I control, I stay on top becomes his version of pleasure, not because it brings true joy, but because he doesn't know any other way. It's like a person raised in a grey city who's only ever drunk warm water his whole life. If you give him a glass of cold orange juice, he'll flinch, frown, say something's off, because familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar joy. It's familiar for the manipulator to live in a state of I control everything. It gives him the illusion of safety, as if he can hide behind a strategy, as if when everything is calculated, he's protected. But that's not joy. It's pseudo-pleasure, from minimizing pain, not from touching happiness. And so he lives like this, for years, decades. On the surface, everything's stable. Everything is under control. But why does it feel empty inside? Because the whole system runs on avoidance, not on living. He's not living, he's sidestepping life. Like someone who never enters the sea for fear of getting his feet wet. He sits on the beach, warms himself, watches, plans, criticizes others, but never steps in. And one day, he ends up alone. And even if someone is next to him, they're not truly close. They're just a figure of convenience, someone with whom he shares bills, children, plans, a household, but not a soul. And living with someone who feels like a stranger is scarier than being alone. Because it's the constant sensation of foreignness. You sit next to them, eat, talk, sleep, but deep down you know this person will never truly know who you are, because you never gave them the chance. And the scariest part isn't that, it's that you don't even want to be known. You've gotten used to living in a capsule. You've gotten used to being alone, even in a relationship. That's the manipulator's pain. He chose this model himself. Yes, perhaps unconsciously. Yes, perhaps because of wounds, fear, trauma. But he chose it, again and again. He could have tried a different way. He could have allowed something real. He could have stayed, not as a winner, but as a human being. But he chose structure over feeling, utility over depth, safety over authenticity. And yet, to live is always a risk. To love means losing control. To feel means being vulnerable. And to be with someone is always a chance of being rejected. But that's where life is. That's where warmth is. That's where everything real lives. The manipulator didn't lose in the eyes of others. He lost to himself. Because one day, in the silence, he'll realize it. He'll realize that his partner was never his person. He'll realize he feels nothing. He'll realize that even if everything went according to plan, it was someone else's plan. A life without soul. Just calculation, just control, just a system. And it'll be too late, because no one can give back the years he spent avoiding love. The more I came across stories like this, the clearer I understood. Manipulators are not always lost souls. They're not stupid. They don't hurt by accident. They're not confused. They know. They understand perfectly well. It's not an impulse, not a reaction to hurt. It's called calculation, a scheme, a plan, an algorithm. Some of them build relationships like long-term strategies. They don't just accidentally influence their partner. They spend years crafting a space around the other person, a space where guilt comes first, then disorientation, and eventually the person stops being themselves. They isolate softly, as if by chance. They devalue gently, with a subtle smile. They strip resources not with commands, but under the guise of care. And if you look at it from the outside, you won't find obvious violence. There are no screams, no blows, just a strategy of slow erasure. It's like a drop of water wearing away a stone. You don't notice each drop, but one day, there's a dent where you used to be. You stop arguing, you stop suggesting, you're afraid of being inconvenient. You choose your words carefully. You've been trained to be a shadow. You've learned not to irritate. And all of this with full awareness of what he's doing. He may even joke about it with friends, brag about how cleverly he turned the situation around. He boasts about how easily he made you feel guilty. He's pleased, like a grandmaster making the perfect move. And that's the most terrifying part, because he chooses not to love, he chooses to use. He chooses to live with someone he doesn't respect, but who is convenient, available, and securely attached. But living with someone you don't love is violence too, not against your partner, but against yourself. Every day, you betray your own soul. You look into their eyes and lie. You wake up in the same bed thinking, I wish he would just leave. You pretend everything's fine, but deep inside it feels like you're drinking water from someone else's glass every single day. Such a life drains even the manipulator himself, because there's no love in it, only the process of retention. He doesn't build, he holds on. He doesn't embrace, he rations affection. He doesn't live, he maintains a structure where he isn't alone, but also isn't with the one he wants. Now imagine this. You live with someone you didn't choose with your heart, but kept by your mind. You know they love you, you know they try, but you don't see a human being, you see a control object. And every day you chip away at them, not because they're bad, but because you chose it this way. And now, 10 or 15 years have passed. You have a house, a family, a seemingly happy story, but you can't remember the last time you truly loved someone. You're like a restorer, slowly destroying the painting, carefully, with a smile, wearing white gloves. I've seen couples like this. And more than brutality, what I fear most is smart violence. Systemic, precise, polite. It doesn't scream, doesn't hit, doesn't lock doors. It just sips the other person in small gulps, every single day, and calls it a mature relationship. And yes, it's a conscious choice, made not in anger, not in a rush, but in silence, with a cold head, with the phrase, "This will be easier." But easier doesn't mean right, doesn't mean human, doesn't mean that you won't lay your head on the pillow at night and wonder, what if I tried being alive? I know what it feels like to be a victim, not from theory, not from books. I know it from the inside, from pain, from experience. All my life I was the kind of person who was easy to trust, too easy. I always believed words. I always thought that if someone smiles, they must be kind. If they say I love you, then they must mean it. I was convenient for the world, non-confrontational, flexible, compassionate, sympathetic. I genuinely felt sorry for those who were hurting, even when they later hurt me. I justified everyone. I blamed the pain on a hard past. And I gave, again and again. Now I understand. I was the perfect target, the ideal material for manipulators. Soft, unsuspecting, trusting. And they came. They knew how to be attentive in the beginning. They read me. They found my weak spots like a key in a lock. I felt warmth, and then it turned into cold. And I didn't understand right away why I was freezing in a relationship where flowers once bloomed. I remember those feelings. I remember the fear, when you feel that something is off but you can't explain it, when you no longer recognize yourself but you still hope it'll get better. I remember losing time, not months, years, while I waited, while I believed, while I tried to adjust. I thought, maybe I'm just too sensitive, maybe it's my fault, maybe I'm not trying hard enough. I remember my energy fading, draining, not into me, not into life, but into constantly gathering myself from the floor. And the scariest part, I remember the moment I started losing my soul, that spark, that inner fire. I stopped feeling joy, stopped dreaming. I was just functioning. That's why I understand victims. I understand them to my very core, to the silence inside, the frozen stare, the forced smile. I know how hard it is to leave, when you don't even have the strength to believe you deserve something else. And that's exactly why I created this channel. Not to lecture, not to teach anyone, but to give a voice to those who are silent, to say, you are not alone, you are not crazy, you have the right to be yourself and to be loved. I know you can't always leave right away. Sometimes the circumstances feel like change. Sometimes it's the kids, sometimes it's the money, sometimes just fear. And in that case, the most important thing is to preserve yourself, your soul, your awareness, your inner you. My goal is not to make someone leave. It's to offer tools, to hold up a mirror, to shine a light on the places where we are erased, where we are made to feel guilty, where we are used under the mask of love. And if you can't walk away just yet, then at least learn not to give everything. Don't erase yourself. Don't hand someone else the right to control your boundaries, your plans, your body, your time, your life. You are not an investment. You are not a project. You are a person. My journey hasn't been fast, and I'm still learning. I still catch myself trusting too easily, trying to justify being too soft. But now I see, now I know. And if even one person, hearing my words, realizes they're in a trap, then none of this was in vain. Life never offers the same scenario twice. Each story comes with its own pain, its own dynamics, its own context. Sometimes the manipulation comes from friends, sometimes colleagues, sometimes parents or neighbors, or even people you're not that close to. It's unpleasant, it's painful, but with stories like that, you usually can walk away. You can say, I don't want to stay in touch anymore. You can stop answering the phone. You can cut ties, painfully, yes, but the option exists. What's far more terrifying is when manipulation creeps into places where you have no levers, where the victim is a child, vulnerable, dependent, not yet able to tell the difference between love and control, when the manipulator is a parent saying, I do everything for you, and in the very next breath, devaluing, humiliating, demanding, blackmailing, and the child can't run, can't protect themselves, can't even name what's happening, because it's all hidden behind the phrase, you owe me, or worse, you're nothing without me. Even harder, being an adult woman, married to a manipulator, unable to leave because she's alone with a child, no support, no money, no clear way out. It's like living in a windowless apartment, hearing people outside laughing, living, breathing, while you can't even open the door, not because you don't want to, but because you have no key. And all you can do is endure, adapt. Tell yourself, it's for the child, it's okay, later. Now's not the time. And yes, sometimes that's the truth. Sometimes there's really nowhere to go. Sometimes life corners you, and all you can do is try to preserve your inner strength. And then there's the story of business. When you go into partnership with someone and later realize you've been pulled into a setup where you're not a teammate, you're a resource. Now it's not just pain, it's loss, financial, reputational, sometimes almost catastrophic. But here, strangely enough, there's a kind of protection, paperwork, contracts, court, a legal way out. But in families, in friendships, in love, there is no such shield. Their manipulation is far more subtle, and cutting ties is far more painful. And this is what matters most. Not every situation can be controlled. You won't always be able to walk away, or defend yourself, or say no. Sometimes you won't even recognize the danger right away. Sometimes you'll fall into a trap because the person was just too convincing, or because you needed to believe, or simply because you wanted to feel loved. But knowledge is always the first defense. If you understand how manipulation works, if you know the signs, if you learn to ask yourself hard questions, if you stop making excuses and start calling things by their names, then you have a chance. To be safe doesn't always mean leaving. Sometimes it means seeing, stopping the self-blame, stopping the thoughts like, he's just going through something, stopping the excuses for emotional or verbal blows. To be safe means stop living by someone else's script and start seeing what play you've been cast in. I always say, it's better not to get caught, better to learn to recognize, better to build that inner voice that says, something here isn't right. And for that, you need to look manipulation straight in the face, without romance, without illusion, without the usual excuse, well, nobody's perfect. No, there is simply unhealthy, and it needs to be known, recognized, and not justified. Only then do you remain on the side of your own life, on the side of your soul. There's one myth I come across all the time, that only people with low self-esteem become victims of manipulation. That you have to be weak, insecure, dependent. No, that's not true. It's a beautiful, convenient lie that hides a much scarier truth. Anyone can get caught in the trap, even those who know how to stand up for themselves. Even those who are confident, successful, intelligent, charismatic, and yes, even those who have helped others, sometimes end up needing help themselves. It's not just people who don't know how to say no who become victims. Sometimes it's the ones who know how to hear yes, the ones who are open, who fall in love, who believe. Because trust isn't weakness, it's a human ability to connect. And manipulators sense those people instantly. They see, here is a soul craving closeness. Here is a person who isn't expecting a trick. Not because they're naive, but because they're not playing a game. They're not scheming. And the manipulator is. They win precisely where no one expects the blow. Sometimes it's just falling in love. Sometimes it's the hope. This one is different. Sometimes it's one wrong look, one word, one evening, and you're already in, already invested. And getting out is no longer just walking away. It's dragging yourself out of the emotions, the lies, the attachment, the hope. So please, don't blame yourself. If you've ended up in a manipulative relationship, it doesn't mean something's wrong with you. It means you're human, feeling, open, trusting, and maybe very strong, just not at that moment, not in that place. My channel isn't about blame. It's not about saying, here's the mistake, here's the diagnosis. My channel is about recognition, like an inner scanner that doesn't always switch on right away. But with every episode, every video, every insight, it starts to work. I repeat the same themes over and over, from different angles. That's on purpose, because understanding comes in stages. First you just listen, then you start recognizing familiar patterns. Then you notice them in your own life. And then, one day, you catch yourself thinking, I felt this before. I just couldn't explain it. That's the path. Not quick, not linear. But once you're on it, you start to see. You begin to tell the difference between love and dependency, between care and control, between support and emotional blackmail, between closeness and manipulative bonding that's always driven by calculation. And once you see it clearly, even just once, you'll never be able to confuse it with love again. Understanding will start to work on autopilot. You'll feel the falseness early on. You won't argue with yourself. You won't justify. You'll simply say, no, this isn't mine. And you'll walk away. Not with a fight, not in tears, but with respect for yourself. That's why I created this channel. So that one day, inside you, a quiet, steady light will ignite.
And no manipulator, no matter how smart, charming or calculating they are, will ever be able to extinguish it.
Sometimes I wonder, what if manipulators are watching this channel? Maybe by accident, maybe out of curiosity, or maybe they just want to check. What are they saying about us? So they sit there, watching, listening, nodding at the screen. Well, that's sharp, nicely observed. I should try that sometime. Oh, a new term for the technique, pity inversion. They take notes, memorize, observe. And maybe that should scare me, as if I'm feeding them ideas, as if I'm giving them access to someone else's pain, so they can strike even more precisely. But you know what? I'm not afraid, because even if they are watching, this channel still isn't for them. Sure, they might pick something up, new moves, new masks, something technical, how to be subtler, gentler, deeper, how to smother resistance, how to pose as the victim, how to gain sympathy and then tighten the noose again. But there's one problem. A manipulator can never truly experience what I talk about here. They can imitate but not feel. They can perform but not be. Because love isn't a technique. Love is a space where no one breaks anyone. It's where you don't have to manipulate just to not be abandoned. It's when you sit next to someone and know you're safe, you're loved, you're needed, just because you exist. A manipulator can't grasp that. It terrifies them because it's unmanageable. No hooks, no guarantees. You give without demanding. You speak, not to achieve a goal, but to connect. You feel, and that's enough. To a manipulator, that sounds like a loss of control. To a human being, that's freedom. So if you are a manipulator, and you're watching, and you're nodding, and you're mentally adopting techniques, okay, go ahead, take it, use it. Maybe you'll even get better at your game. But know this, every new video on this channel is one more minute you didn't spend with yourself. Because you're still playing a role. You didn't ask yourself, what do I really feel? You didn't stop to think, why am I still choosing to destroy instead of create? You just kept performing in a show no one is watching to the end anyway. And we're not here to perform, we're here to live. Honestly, with tears, with joy, with pauses, sometimes with pain, but real pain. Not a dramatic plot, but truth. So keep watching if you want. Maybe you'll learn something. Maybe one day you'll understand not how to control better, but how not to miss your chance at a real life. And if someday, instead of writing down a new tactic, you just sit in silence and cry, that will be your first victory. Not over someone, but over what was once done to you. Yes, I create this for those who've been victims, but also for those on the other side. For those who caused pain, for those who still do, and for those who may not even realize they're living in a system of destruction, not love. Because deep down, I still believe in one thing. Awareness is possible, even for a manipulator, even for the most calculating, charming, clever, talented one. Sometimes, something clicks. Not suddenly, not loudly, but somewhere in the quiet, somewhere in solitude, on a completely ordinary evening when there's no one left to blame, no one left to pressure, and fear begins to rise. Because now you're alone. Not because someone left you, but because you never built a bridge, you controlled it. And that crystal bridge, so delicate, so clear, the one you walk together across, suddenly starts to crack. The crystal bridge is a metaphor, but life often feels exactly like that. You think you've got everything under control. You manage the words, the tone, the timing, the money, the connections, the reactions. You create the illusion of a shared path. But at some point, control fails. And then the bridge shatters. With a sound that rings in your ears, with glass that crumbles into memories. And suddenly you realize you weren't walking on the bridge. You were holding it up, like a conductor afraid to let go of the baton. And now that it's broken, you fall alone. Because no one's been walking beside you for a long time. You just didn't notice, they had already left, or maybe disappeared inside themselves, even while still living with you. That's why I speak to all sides, because I don't believe in black and white roles. I believe in the possibility of change. I believe that even a manipulator can one day say, I don't want to live like this anymore. I don't want to build bridges out of fragile threads. I want to be alive, not victorious. That's not an easy decision. It's not a romantic twist. It's work. It's pain. It's stepping toward the very feelings you used to make others feel. But it's a real step. A human one. A living one. Life is only one, and it's not as long as we imagine. Too much of it is spent surviving, scheming, fearing, waiting, and not enough actually living. I don't believe people are evil by nature. I believe they got lost. That someone learned to control because otherwise it hurt too much. That someone chose to lie because truth was punished. That someone became cruel because that was their only shield. But I also believe that everyone has a moment to reach the shore, to see the crystal bridge has shattered, and not run off to build a new one from the same old blueprints, but to sit down, to cry, to breathe, and to ask, maybe for the first time, could I do it differently now? And we are here, on this channel, on this shore. We speak, we remember, we learn to listen, we learn to understand ourselves, and we choose to live. Look around. A warm beach, the sound of waves, the sun that warms but doesn't burn. Sand beneath your feet, a light breeze in your hair. And you walk, you breathe, and suddenly you feel alive. This isn't just a backdrop, it's a reminder that life, it's right here, now, in this moment. Not in the future, not later, not when everything gets better. Now. If you're 30, on average you'll see 30 to 40 more summer seasons. Maybe a bit more, maybe less, and each one is unique. You will never see this exact summer again. How many mornings will you wake up next to someone who feels like home? How many evenings will you laugh out loud, not just pretend to be polite? How many cups of tea will you drink in silence, without fear, without pressure, without that feeling that you owe something? Not that many. And here I stand, on this shore, listening to the sea. And I tell myself, I choose not to follow someone else's script. Not other people's expectations, not the masks, not survival, not erasing myself for someone else's gain. I choose myself, my feelings, my breath, my tastes, interests, values, my work, the one that sets my eyes on fire even if no one praises it, my truth, even if it doesn't fit someone's idea of what it should be. I know what it means to be a victim, not theoretically, but truly. I know what it's like to live for years chasing someone else's dreams, fulfilling someone else's wishes, being convenient, useful, needed, but not to yourself. I know what it's like to sigh at the end of the day and feel like you're living not your life but someone else's endless to-do list. Each day, like fulfilling a plan that was never yours. But here's what matters. Even when you've figured out a lot, even when you have knowledge, experience, intuition, technique, there's still a risk of falling into the trap again. Manipulators know how to be charming. They know how to play on pain. They know how to earn your trust, not forcefully, but as if by accident. And you don't even notice how you start giving again. At first just a little, then more, then yourself. And that's not a reason to blame yourself. It's a reason to be attentive, to be gentle with yourself, to be cautious, not out of fear, but out of self-worth. Because even I, who knows the techniques, who can spot the masks, can, in a moment, believe that this time it's different. That this person is not like the others. That maybe, just maybe, this time it will be different. And that's not weakness. It's simply a human longing to be in love. But now, in this very moment, I choose awareness. I choose to breathe this air, to exist, not to pretend, not to prove myself, not to serve someone else's agenda, just to walk on the sand and to know everything I give is my gift, not my obligation. You can choose to, even if you're still in pain, even if you're still confused, even if you don't understand anything right now. You can choose to stand on your own side. As long as you choose to be yourself, you're not lost. As long as you notice that you're hurting, you're alive. As long as you're capable of doubt, you can change your path. Life, it's not a draft. You can't rewrite a year. You can't rewind to 25 or 33 or 41 and say, now I'll do it all differently. You can only choose now, right in this moment, while the wave touches your feet, while your heart still responds to the truth, while there's still a warm, I want to be myself, inside you. And that already means everything. That's the very point where a new life begins. There's one simple truth we too often forget. Unmet needs will always attract someone to fill them. If there's emptiness inside you, someone will eventually knock on that door, with words, with promises, with attention, with eyes that say, I understand you like no one else. Not because the world is evil, but because that's how the human psyche works. Where there's a hole, it draws others in. If you have a chronic lack of warmth, love, respect, recognition, sooner or later someone will come along offering exactly that, but at a price they won't name up front. That's why I say, we'll learn together how to meet our own needs, not waiting for someone to guess them, not hoping that if we're good enough someone will save us, but seeing our own joys, our own lacks, and giving ourselves permission to fill them. Because if you don't do it, someone will inevitably come along and say, oh, you're exactly what I need. You've got energy, soul, care, empathy, money, connections. Would you mind sharing? Or better yet, just give it all to me. And you won't even notice how you agree, because it hurts to feel empty, because you long for someone, anyone, to simply be there. And that's when the brilliant manipulator enters the stage. Subtle, polite, cautious, like a real-life Moriarty. He knows exactly where it hurts. He doesn't push, he gently touches. And while you're melting, he's already carving a path deep inside, into your soul, into your resources, into your trust. And when you finally wake up, you're no longer in your home but in his castle. You're working towards someone else's dream. You're soothing his pain. You're healing his wounds. You're no longer you. You've become the support system he never built for himself. And then we wonder, why am I being used again? The answer is, we never locked the doors from the inside. We never firmly declared, I matter too. My feelings are real. I don't have to save everyone. Sometimes we laugh and say, well, if you're a donkey, of course someone's going to hop on. I get the irony. And yes, it's a harsh comparison, but honestly, it hits the mark. Because that's exactly how it goes. If you carry everything on your shoulders, someone will climb on top. Softly, without asking, without shame. And by the way, it's not even about their genius, it's not cleverness, it's just how things work. If you radiate a readiness to give, if you don't check who's taking, if you're not in touch with yourself, you become open to someone else's agenda. The truth is, healthy relationships aren't easy. They require self-awareness. They require maturity. They require saying no, not because you're mean, but because you're protecting yourself. It takes letting go of the role of the ever-forgiving, endlessly kind, overly accommodating one. It takes stepping out of the childhood belief, be good and they'll love you, and learning to be the adult who says, I'm already good. And love is not a transaction. The most important thing, don't lie to yourself. Don't say, this isn't manipulation, he's just like that, he's going through something, I'm imagining things. No, you're not imagining anything. If there's a quiet voice inside saying, this hurts, that's not drama, that's a signal. And if you don't silence yourself, if you listen, if you allow yourself the truth, you're no longer someone who can be easily used. And life, it keeps moving. It won't wait for you to figure it all out. It won't give you another shot at youth, at inspiration, at love. That's why it's so important to stop and choose yourself. That's where everything real begins. Not with a promise to love someone else, but with the decision not to betray yourself. You know, we'll have many more walks like this. Unhurried, by the sea, no rush, no pressure, no loud declarations, just you and me, open air, warm light, honest conversations, because I don't want this channel to be just an archive of other people's pain. I want it to be a space to breathe, to understand, to hear yourself, beneath the noise of others' voices. Write to me, share. I truly read everything. I hear what's between the lines, and I know every one of your experiences is not weakness. It's the strength of what you've lived through. We'll talk about everything, without shame, without pretense. Where dependence begins, how to recognize manipulation, why we fall for it again and again, and what to do when you no longer want to play these games, but don't yet know how to live differently. I create playlists for a reason. Each video is a small life scenario where I show, here's what it looks like, here's what one person feels, here's how the other behaves, and most importantly, here's how you could respond. These are mini recommendations, small steps, not a guide to the perfect life, but rather emotional first aid for when you feel lost, when you don't know how to react, when you want to speak, but there's a lump in your throat and noise in your mind. Building new patterns of behavior is work, not romantic, not easy. It's like learning to walk again. You crawl first, then stumble, then walk, until one day you can calmly stand and say, this won't continue. I don't want this. I don't agree. And yes, not everyone gets it right away. Sometimes even a simple phrase, you just crossed a line, can feel like a heroic act. But this is your path, and you have every right to move at your own pace, without rushing, without comparison, without guilt. We'll have many more moments like this. Maybe you'll listen to me on a walk, maybe on the subway, maybe through your headphones when you can't sleep. And in those moments, I want you to feel not loneliness, but connection. That you're not alone, that someone else has walked this path before, that someone is putting into words what you haven't yet found language for, but feel deeply. This journey isn't taken alone, and not in darkness. There will be light here. There will be conversation. There will be answers, and silence, full of meaning. And if one day, on the most ordinary day, you say something true, calmly, confidently, with self-respect. Know this, it worked. You've made it. You've grown. You're already different. And for now, stay close, listen, write, share, ask questions. Let this be our shared road, with respect, with humor, with life. No masks, no shame, no templates. Simply, you're a living, breathing human being, and you don't owe anyone anything, except to be yourself. I've tried to create not just a channel, but a true mini-series. One where you don't have to guess what's happening. One where, as a viewer, as someone who's been a victim, you can see yourself, see the situation from the outside, hear the words spoken at just the right moment, and most importantly, feel that you are not alone. Because when you're in the fog, when you're being devalued, when you're being broken by words or by silence, sometimes you simply don't know what to say. And not because you're stupid, but because in moments like that, logic shuts down. What kicks in is learned fear, old pain. That's why I create ready-to-use responses. At first, you can just listen, again and again, until they become part of you. Until one day, at the most unexpected moment, you respond in the same way. Not from a script, not from a manual, but because the knowledge is already inside you. It's taken root. It's yours now. I understand. Not everything will work on the first try. Even my advice, it doesn't always land right away. Sometimes it takes time. Time for it to grow inside you. Time for you to believe it's possible, that you can respond, that you have the right to say, it hurts, and I don't want this anymore. Sometimes it takes months, sometimes years, but you're not alone in this process. Here, on this channel, we're in it together, and we're not in a hurry. We're learning, we're growing, we're healing. I know what it's like to sit there, replaying conversations in your head. I should have said that. Why did I stay silent again? Why do I freeze every time he raises his voice? I've been there too. I've stood there with numb hands when I needed to say enough. I felt stupid because I couldn't find the words in time. But now I know it's not stupidity. It's a reaction to pain. It's the scar of old wounds. And that's exactly why I'm creating this mini-series. So that you can live through these moments, not in reality, but in a safe space. And only then use them in your real life. Yes, my dear ones, everything takes time. But that's why we're here. Not to judge ourselves, but to learn how to live differently. More gently, more confidently, more freely. I'm here with you. I'm learning too. And I truly believe we can do this.